excuse the technicians all around us. They are trying to make stuff happen. Before we start, please make sure that your phones and computers are set to quiet. I do not want to hear any beeping. Then, apologies. Rhonda is coming at 9:40 today, so I've got a latest apology for Councillor Tibble. I'll move that. Seconded by Councillor Wharehinga. All in favour? Contrary, carried. I take you to page 5, councillors, which are our unconfirmed minutes. They were sent out by Annie quite some time ago. And if I can get a mover for those. Moved by Councillor Robinson, seconded by Councillor Cranston. If there are no comments or queries, all in favour, contrary, carried. Okay, this is very good to tell us. Thank you for this, Pauline, our governance plan.
Do I have apologies with that? It's actually needs to be updated. So you've got from August through June, and it's relating to the others. So by the time you get the next one, it will be updated because you should have April. You need to have the meetings associated with it within the next quarter. So it will be updated, and if we wanted it before, I can circulate that. So that it does show that those kind of reports are usually following the same format, that you will have consistent ones going to finance and performance, which is always your quarterly financial and those things, but we will update it exactly for the 3 months.
And that gives us a good oversight over what is coming our way and what we still need to cover, and also your program. Thank you for that. Councillors, I take you back to page 5. Can I please have someone who actually attended the meeting? Thank you, Councillor Foster. Second by someone who was actually at the meeting. Thank you, Councillor Teddy. All in favour?
Fine.
Burn. Okay. Let us start with our first report. Page 12, councillors. You will see what we are dealing today as policies and reports that we are getting ready to consult on in our 3-year plan. Some minor tweaks, some major tweaks, but Pauline will walk us through that. So Pauline, what I'm going to do is open the paper on page 12, which is our liability management and investment policy. And then if you want to give us a summary, and then we can open up if there are any questions from councillors.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. As aptly stated, that every 3 years that we get a chance to review those policies, we can review in the interim time period. There are some of them that need to occur only with a adoption plan consultation, but these can be adopted before. But what our process is, let's look at what we have and what needs to be changed from the last time. These are 2 umbrella kind of policies that sits above and is referred to in the Local Government Act. Underneath that we have a Treasury policy which gets into the real details of how we're doing. It's more operational, but that update and those changes will probably come at the next finance and performance. But you have the 2 umbrella statements which we will put alongside our long-term plan for consultation. In terms of the liability management policy, what that is basically saying, which you can see on page 14, is updating the thresholds that we borrow, and if you like, we have alongside those kind of things what we also have mandated to make sure that, okay, what is our interest in terms of our total income, and what is interest in terms of the rates. Those are mostly set by legislation, but as you can see, our borrower, who we is LGFA, and they have for some of their covenants is a little bit, it's not as restrictive as what we actually have set under our legislation because of our growth of our council compared to others. So that is there. You will also see this when it aligns to the financial strategy, and it aligns to the limits that we had stated within our draft financials. All of these are interwoven to actually tell the same story. The only other part with the investment policy, a little bit of an update of what had been already approved with Council's workshops with regards to our CCTO and our overall investment strategies. But happy to take any questions that you may have.
Councillor Thompson, thank you. And Councillor Cranston.
Yeah, thanks for that report. Yeah, just reading through it, I'm happy with the liability management policy because that's just bringing it up to the LGFA standards, so that sits good with me. In terms of the investment policy, when you look at the objectives, optimising return on investment, diversifying the mix of investments to spread risks, I just think of GHL and Treasury farms and how that's going to sort of sit with that, whether if we approve this, that we need to do things in regards to that in line with the policy. What I'm thinking.
So there's two parts to this. There's the council umbrella policy, what it is, which has a raft of already semi-commercial or commercial ones that haven't been transferred over to GHL. Then underneath that, there actually says, which we workshop with GHL, their investment policy, how that works. So basically, they've got a subset under our overall arching one. So it does fit in what we had in the original intent and how we updated the parts of it. And I'm just trying to keep up with the places with it.
It's at page 26, socially, environmentally, ethically responsible.
So that's our umbrella. And then underneath that, you can see council-controlled trading organisations. That were all those agreed principles and everything that come under that. There were a subset that was directly applicable to GHL. So the other ones above that is anything that we're working that maybe not in the CCTO, but they were the principles as such associated with it. And then the subset was where we workshopped with GHL, their investment, how that fitted into our investment policy.
So it's...
It does, yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor.
Sorry.
Oh, there we go. You'll need to do this.
Sorry, through your worship, and once this goes out for consultation, if adopted as it is, and then adopted, it gives you the good, as Pauline was saying, in terms of the overarching of investment principles, but it does give you a gauge around is what you have set and anticipated for your CCTO achieving what you want from your investment portfolio. So that's where your sub kind of or principles come in that we, as you said, as workshop, but we should still be looking in with those broader principles in mind about whether it's set out and achieving what it's supposed to be achieving, or given that you believe that these are the right principles that we should still be adopting.
Thank you for that. I've just received an email saying I'm online, can you see me? And I think it might be Rhonda. Oh, no, I know, Rowena, I can see you. Someone else just emailed me with, it just comes up as a number. And just replied, I'll let you know. I hope it's not a hack. Anyway, Councillor Cranston, you are next. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. The biggest risk to most people is when they get to the top of their borrowing capacity and limits. And what kind of, I know our fiscal issues in that, we're getting there now. What sort of strategies have we got to get that limit down again? I know it's going to be difficult, Matt, but you're sitting right at the top. I mean, I read through it, and the only comment I saw with regards to that was council may repay borrowings from renewal loans, but that actually doesn't do anything to our borrowing. So sitting right at the top of our borrowing limits, is there a strategy to reduce our lending?
Yeah, and you're quite right. What sits above these two policies is our financial strategy. And the financial strategy will be presented to you next week. And it says, what is our borrowings likely to be? Okay, we were forecasting what it is for these 3 years, but what is it beyond, and what is it the 10, and what are we doing with regards to that, and what are we mindful of? So exactly what you're saying is, how do we bring it back, and how do we actually manage that over time? So it says it more in full, but it actually also projects the debt to 2034, and it projects it because we've got our peak, if you like, to the first 3 years of the next year of the plan, but what does it do after that? And so that is, it takes into account the forecast recovery things that we are looking at. It doesn't take into account all the unknowns, but what is quantifiable at this particular time, and what that's projecting is that it goes down. The peak is about 28, 29, but mostly it only goes 5 or about 10 million more than what we've got in the first 3 years, and that's to say what is the additional recovery we've got. And then by the 2034, you see it starting to taper down again, based on the set of circumstances that we have now, and paying it back down. So hopefully you'll have more of the details about that will come into next report to sustainable drafting.
Councillor Alder.
Thank you, Your Worship. Page 23, number 13, reserves. The council has a number of them. They're not liquid. Can you tell me what form these reserves are in, and what rules surround them when it comes to accessing?
The reserves that we have, most of them is like your depreciation reserves. There are some other particular reserves which we keep track on with regards to development operations, and then there are some other minor things. If it's for a particular purpose, we need to match it, that it's spent there. But the majority of it, as I say, 80-90% of it is the depreciation reserves. In terms of the rules and things like that, you've got a little bit that within the revenue and financing policy is to say what that is and how it can be used. But basically the reserves, each one of them are determined for what and how it can be used. So the depreciation reserve says it's for renewal, it's repayments for the entities that have been built up, and there's major repairs and maintenance. So most of it is within an umbrella within the revenue and financing policy associated with it.
Right, so is the reserve a tangible asset? Is it a deposit?
So,
or is it?
Yeah. So what happens is it's as the liability policy says, it says we borrow down when we've exhausted all our cash. So if there's money coming in that is for those reserves, we use that first, and we create internal loans associated with it. So there's not cash sitting in a bank account for those reserves, but it recognises that there is a payment to pay out as when we use them. We could, if you were say, most other councils, definitely the depreciation reserve, because the depreciation reserves are mostly a function of an accounting recognition of the depreciation expense. They don't have cash back reserves with it. It's only in a particular case.
It means it's more readily available. You're able to get to gold more quickly, possibly, more clearly.
No, you're wrong.
And then we're going to go into small groups now, team, and we're going to share what we've come up with. Now, we're just going to do 10 minutes.
It's not going well.
In small groups of around about 3, which means you'll only have about 3 minutes each. So you may really want to be able to tell the whole story of where you've got to, but we need to start practicing too, being...
You might have come on.
Oh, she's been muted and kicked out. That's what happened, councillors. Take note. Anyway, Pauline.
I can't remember.
So yes, it's not.
Non-tangible, it's not a
Well, it's not a
verification.
cash, it's not cash, it's only if we had a particular purpose like the library reserves or something like that, yeah.
Okay, Councillor Foster, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Page 14, we talk about net external debt and net debt, and there's an explanation of net external debt, and I think I've asked this question before, but in, you know, we've got net external debt per rateable unit and then net debt per capita. Why is they different?
Should be the same word.
Should be the same.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
So there are some things in there, as I say with this, there will be subject to minor changes in the words and things like that as we go through. And there's some of the policies and things as we're updating graphs and different parts of it. There may be moments, but good spotting. Thank you.
Chocolate fish for you,
Yes,
Councillor.
definitely.
Okay, councillors, are there any more questions? Councillor Wharehinga and then Councillor Papanuku.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. On whole, I'm happy for this to go out to consultation in its form. I do want to put a pin in one part, though. It's in regards to the investment policy. Let me just find what page I was on. Page 29. And it's something that I had I brought up in council before. It's around our ethical positioning in regards to our investments. And I mean, we do talk about our ethics there, but they're they're not as pointed, I guess, as I would like them to be, but I'm hoping that this will come out of the community consultation. We talk about our ethical standards of doing the investing and the monitoring, not the ethical standard of what we're investing in. We do say where possible. I feel like that should maybe be stronger, that we should observe that the publicly available ethical profile of any potential investment aligns with council. Things like that. I had brought them up before. So that was my only kind of addendum to our consultation docs.
Are you moving it?
Yes, I'm happy to move.
Great, thank you. Okay, Councillor Pahuruguriwai.
Thank you, Your Worship. On page 23, firstly there's a spelling on page 14 and 26 principles, should be principles. Point 14, 15, 26 somewhere. And then just on page 23, under contingent liabilities, could you give me an example of what kind of community and service organisations we might be financial guarantor for?
Yes, and I'm sorry, I should have mentioned this one. It should actually say from time to time, like we had. So 14, it says council provides financial guarantees on page 23, and on below it also says foreign exchange from time to time. It should say that as well. We haven't since 2005 used that. What it was, say for argument's sake, in those particular community things that we were doing in that particular case is something that was an eco challenge there, and an eco challenge of that particular one. It was mostly with regards to, and I'll try to get the words associated with it, because I was trying to see when was the last time we used it, but we do need to update it from time to time to just in case it may be relevant in the future. But see, eco challenge. It's no longer used. The reserve was created when they ran the eco challenge coast to coast Ironman contest in about 2002. It was held for a copyright and it was sold back to them. So basically, it's only a contingent liability associated with those kind of things, and we were managing that kind of a process. But it's basically a practice that we haven't really used from those early 2000s.
Okay. Do we have a seconder for this report? Thank you, Councillor Foster. Thank you, Pauline, and I do acknowledge it is a work in progress and it will require some fine-tuning. Yes, but that is all good. All in favour? Contrary, carried. Councillors, I take you to the magical page 32. Proposed fees and charges.
So this is an annual process that we do, and it does seem to be, if you like, very operational, because you'll get down to the fees and charges for photocopying, but it is everything and anything, and all of those fees and charges are then available on our website so people can see them. Most of the paper outlines what were the changes and why we were doing. The two things that probably, as noted in the paper, the review of our water by meter that is charged for their fees was done on a basis, and that is on a cost recovery basis associated with it, and it's on how much does it cost to produce the water against the sectors that are using it, and it shows that the increase has gone up by a little bit more than the rate of inflation associated with it. And the only other point is to note, Kiwa Pools was adopted and consulted before the Kiwa Pools operation, if you like, has only been 3 to 4 months. We are reviewing the full after we get a year's of people who are using pool know what are the fees and charges rather than having it by the rate of inflation. So that will come to you at a later date for consideration. But happy to take any questions you have, and I'm sure my colleagues over to the right will be able to answer any specific questions in the areas.
I just want to start this off because sometimes this turns into a circus, and there will be no circus today, I can assure you. Please do not nitpick one little thing that you have decided is one little thing that you have a bone to pick about. Staff have been working through, and there are, if you have a valid question, by all means, I just don't, this is not going to be a circus which we've seen in the past. So, Councillor Robinson, I am going to start with you. Please set the bar high.
I always do, Your Honour.
Oh my goodness, I'm going to have some coffee.
Okay, so page 32, under the summary, it says the fees and charges have predominantly been increased by the rate of inflation for year one, which is 2.9%. I cannot reconcile 2.9% with any generally accepted inflation figure that our community, our business is accepting. I think that seems extraordinarily low. So I've asked why so low. That's one question. I'll ask the second question, then maybe you can bounce the two. You just said before, Pauline, about the water rates increase, which is on page 35. That's jumped up 13%. And what I'd like to know is, again, how can we reconcile that? You've said it's the fees are determined, or the report says rather, the fees are determined how much it costs to produce water. Are we saying our water production costs have gone up 13%? And what I'd like to know is, for our, say, top 5 water users, what will that actually mean in real terms? Like, is that going to be their water bills going to go up tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands? Are we going to get a massive wah-wah from the water using community, impacting jobs and...
Two things. The rate of inflation is set by Bill, which is they do it for local government and they do it from the year previously. And we also check that in terms of what have we got in our revenue and finance. So basically, those external rates we rely upon, and they give those rates to us, and they forecast it in September, October of each time that we do a long-term plan, but they also give updates associated with it. What you are looking at from the last long-term plan, when we say that the inflation rates were different from where we were before, was because where they projected after COVID, they projected a low inflationary rate. But these are checked on their assessments, and those are updated with that. The other part, in terms of the water by meter, which is probably your biggest question, is what does it do to the top users? And I probably just need to actually double check with it, because I had the top users. We were the second top user, and I'll then come back to you if I can give you those kind of the answers. It's not unexpected in terms of it. It's not hundreds of thousands. I think it was the lowest increase was about 6,000, and then the highest based on the things, well, I can't remember whether it was 60,000 associated with it, but whether it was a total bill or something. But I'll come back to you with regards to those.
So are you saying that potentially this increase would add a $60,000 to a business's water bill?
I'll double check whether it's the total amount or whether,
right, so it
I
might
just
be
need to, I just need to know the total bill and what was the percentage increase with it. But they are high volume, and council, being the utilities, is the second biggest.
So just looking at paragraph 9 to sort of wrap it up, the fees are determined on how much it costs to produce water and how much water is being used by commercial industrial sector. What does that mean? So like, it costs this much to produce it, but you get a discount if you use more, or you pay more if you use more? I mean, obviously it's a linear, but I mean, like, it's an exponential charge. I mean, how does it cost 13% more to make water this year than it did last year?
Oh, so the review the last time with the cost recovery was 3 years ago. And so before, and in the interim years, it was the cost of inflation. So it's based on, water costs have gone up. There are significant, so it is looking at that over the time. So definitely the cost of water themselves, the depreciation and operating cost was in the last 2 years 15% and 11%. So it is reflective of how much does it cost, the overall cost to produce water.
So
Barry.
Sorry, thank you, First Chair. The major cost increase this year was because we were running the Waipoa plant as opposed to the Wainaki plant. So that takes water from the river and treats it. It's more expensive to run, needs more chemical, and also needs more motive power. One of the advantages of Wainaki is we can use gravity to push it right to customers. So it's a larger operational expense for this particular year running Waipoa. So a couple of weeks ago we got some good news. We were able to hire Waipoa as a more expensive operator of water produced. But that's attributing to most of the cost increases due to metric delivery of water.
okay, so let me just clarify. Pauline, you said this hasn't been assessed for 3 years, but I thought we do this exercise each year. So are you saying, because that should be in this document, right, that this is the first real cost assessment for the 3 years, that's why it's so high, because that's really relevant, not like it's jumped up 30% from last year. And as to your point, Tim, have we not already paid and absorbed the costs of that additional pumping from the Waipoa? And therefore, is it slightly anomalous to then say that's the basis for increasing water charges moving forward, because that water's not going to cost that much moving forward, is it? Because we've already incurred that cost and we've already paid that cost.
So the first part is we do thorough reviews from the top down in certain circumstances, and this was a review. We don't do it all the time. We actually say the modelling, and we say that this is what we have for the next year's is by the rate of inflation, because we do it from the outset of that first review, and then we actually assess it all the way through. In this particular case, it is the costs have been more than what it was previously, and it is assessed on the whole cost of producing water. You would have noticed just like, so this is only a fraction of the cost. The other costs that have gone up is obviously what we collect from rates for the water supply. So these are in tandem with how you actually do it. This says what is the actual cost per unit, and then what is the sector using, that it works out, that is the price that is needed to be charged to recoup their costs associated with it. The long-term plan will say what are the higher costs that we're expecting to need in the first year, and that is then mapped out to say, okay, this is the cost for the following year, this is what we need to recoup as well. So they go in tandem. Basically, if it's not associated with what the revenue and financing policy says that you collect for rates, what is the other, in terms of that policy, you need to collect with fees and charges. And that's where it's landed at, it's $1.85.
When I made my little announcement earlier about the cell phones, I forgot to also say, democracy staff have asked that when everyone speak, they please speak up. Not everyone has a foghorn voice like myself, so make sure when you speak up loudly, because otherwise they struggle when they do the minutes and need to check stuff to hear some voices on the recordings, especially the peanut gallery, because you are far away from, I assume this is it, picking it up. So please make sure you also speak up. Thank you for that, Councillor Robinson. Thank you, Pauline. Thank you, Mr. Barry. I have Larry Foster and then Councillor Ria and then Councillor Alder.
Yeah, thank you, but just one query. I'm sure in previous years we've had comparisons for the previous year's cost to see, the actual increase, but we haven't this year. Is there any reason for that?
It was just getting it ready to the final document. It's basically one of them has got a calculation that we go through and we say, is it the rate of inflation, is it not? And it was ready for the final doc, not for any other reason. It was just the distribution associated with it. Yeah.
So for us to kind of really see what the we've got to go back to last year's to see what the comparison is. So I would have thought it would have been quite easy just to put what last year's price cost was and the new one. So
did we in the past have that? I can't remember us having the comparison.
The year before that we did. It was just because it came in documentation, because then we take it out on when it comes onto the website by having the one that they were doing it for streamlining the process. But in the future we can make sure that you've got some reference points with that.
thank you.
Thank you, Bishop. Just a clarification question. Can you please explain what on page 34, number 7, bullet point 3, what is the project information memorandum for entities who are not required a building consent? Can you just give what is that?
What is it? It's basically administration fee. So basically, if a person requires a kind of a limb or anything with that, you usually pay for it, or it's associated with your building consent fees and charges. If they don't have any building consent fees and charges, we're charging them the cost of the administration to get it. Otherwise, rest of the print. And I'm happy if Joe's to come through and correct me if I'm wrong with regards to...
Your Worship, no, you're correct. I just wanted to clarify the reason that kind of order don't obtain a building consent from us is that they go through consentium. It's not that they don't need building consents. But we provide the project information memorandum, so at the moment we're doing that as a free service.
Oh, okay. No, yep, cool, thank you.
Councillor Alder, thank you.
I'd like to back up Larry's comments. I was going to say the same thing, but also wherever possible an example, for example, what the marquees cost, that would just help it all over the place. I tried checking the rental value over the last few years to see if that had in fact gone up. I couldn't find any information. Only to say that it hasn't gone up since last year. And my other comment was more of a comment than a question. That at 2 points, it's sort of noticeable that wherever labour is included, staff are having to be on the ground, the cost has increased more. And this is obviously because our wages are going up more than 2.9%.
Okay. Councillor Wharehinga, then Councillor Gregory, and then Councillor Thompson.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I'm comfortable with where we're at in terms of our fees and charges. I'm less concerned in regards to the cost of business. I think the cost of business should be the cost of business. The main thing that I'm concerned with is about the overarching accessibility for our whānau. So our accessibility of our whānau to places like Kiwa Pools, accessibility of the people in our community in order to be able to book our parks, etc., etc. Which isn't accorded or really about the specific fee. It's about us having an overarching view of equity and accessibility for our wider community. So I'm comfortable with where things are here personally. I'm happy to move this paper. I just want to remind us that we also have a duty of ensuring that whānau can access our community, our community utilities equally and equally. Kia ora koutou.
Thank you, Councillor Wharehinga. Councillor Gregory and then Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. I'm happy to second this paper. And I just had a little question which is borderline small. And it's to do with on page 59 with footpath damage. There's a fine that you can receive for footpath damage. And I'm just thinking about all of our damaged footpaths. And so if someone has a tree that damages a footpath, I don't suppose that's what that means. No.
No, so it's, if a person is needing to have access in their building across the footpath, there is part of that consent, they will take out a kind of a bond that says this is a part of the work that you're doing. And they will have to pay that up front, but if there's damage associated with it afterwards, some of the bond will be used, but if there's no damage, there is no cost.
Okay, thank you for that.
Councillor Thompson, and then we'll wrap up with Councillor Telfer. Thank you.
My question relates to page 41, corridor access requests. See, there's a fee of $3.53 for a corridor access request. So say you're doing a driveway. If you're doing a driveway on Glaston Road, it's obviously off the traffic, it makes sense. But if you're doing a driveway in a dead-end street where you're lucky to have one person a day, not only have you got the corridor access request, you've got to do a traffic management plan and get it approved. So your costs are looking over $1,000, and the driveway's only going to cost $1,000. It mentions a minor car at council's discretion. What would this include? Would this include something like that or not?
I have to defer that to Tim, and if we don't know, we would have to come back to you as a kind of the things.
Mr. Barry, would you be able to let us know later what discretion is exercised when there's a corridor access request? Gladstone Road versus someone who lives in a dead-end street might have the, they both are applying for access, but they would have totally different traffic management plans. And if it says their discretion, are you the person using that discretion, or what is the process possibly? So if you can come back later to us, maybe after the meeting, that would be great. Thanks, Councillor Thompson. Last question for Councillor Telfer. Thank you.
I'll try not to get into the nitty-gritty too much, but it's basically following on from Councillor Robinson's query around the 13% increase for water. We've had the explanation that was due to having to run the plant for a big period of time through that time. So next year, when we're looking at next time we're looking at setting these fees, if the plant hasn't been run, can we seriously expect to have a decrease in fees? Because once fees tend to go up, they seem to be used as a baseline. And the other part of my question is, we're talking about the amount of water used by commercial and industrial sector. Is it also metered how much is used by the general public? Because we haven't got metering on every house, so they're not metered, no.
So there's two things with that. Yes, it's a cost recovery basis, and it's on those that are using it, so that would be the portion that would be charged. So if it did go down, they have to go down accordingly. So it would be reviewed in that case. As to the others, bear in mind there's two parts of this. We have water meter for commercial users, and we charge it, and there's a fees associated with that. The other portion, which is the residential, which is the base of it, or those that are non-metered, that's the rate component associated with it. So we collect for that to run that activity through rates. There is a secondary question, there's a later period of time to say, for decisions, does the whole of our area is water meter, but at the moment we only charge water meter for the industrial users. Not all of the residential users has water meter, infrastructure in place to be able to collect that information. You would have to, it has to go through a significant process before you reach those kind of decisions when it comes, but those papers would come back to you.
Kapai? Okay, I have a mover in Councillor Wharahinga. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Gregory. All in favour? 3 carried. Okay, revenue and finance policy as well as our rate remission policy. That's page 82, councillors.
Just want to make sure that the sort of understanding if there is final formatting and editing and things like that still to come before, you know, so there may be minor changes associated. You've got a lot of documents, and a lot of the things are repeated from what was there in existing policy. So what is brought into the paper is what has changed. And as we have stated leading into these things, we've already consulted on part of the recovery rate, which regards to FOSL Category 3. This is, we're taking it broader, as we've always stated that within our draft financials that we would need a recovery rate which was up to 3.5%. So this is the mechanisms that we put it into our revenue and financing policies. We consider the aspects, we say it's a two-step process. We consider who's contributed to the cost, what are the needs, what are the benefits that may come from it. But then there's a second step in this whole overall consideration, what do we consider as a whole? So when we said that the recovery rate, we said we couldn't perhaps distinguish the individual benefits, that there is on whole that is a benefit to the community as a whole, which why it was set across as a uniform charge across all of our ratepayers. There was a little bit of an update with the soil conservation rate, just changing to getting more alignment where the costs were going, occurring in different areas, and it comes into alignment with our water conservation rate. And then is just mentioning that the roads and the footpaths for that they are based on what are the impacts by the sectors on to the roads. And the update for that is saying at this time for the forestry sector, it moves from a 12.5 tonnes, which means residential was a one-time impact. The forestry has had, in the current situation, 12.5. It has been assessed forward work programs, BAU programs of 13.75. I just want to point out a little bit of a typo in the paper, which is recording on page 87 under point number 29. It says that the industrial and commercial has a weighting of 1. It's not, it's a weighting of 2. That hasn't changed, it's just that it's recording it as incorrectly of 1 instead of 2. But, and the draft rates remission was part of those workshops that we had of what we're trying to do and how do we bring it in. So on one stage we're setting rates, and then the other parts is saying, is there an unintended consequence for that blanket across the board setting of rates? How do we address that through that rates remission? Or is there something, behaviour that, economic behaviour that we want to encourage? So the rates remissions is that lever, if you like, and how we manage our collection of rates. Per se. Happy taking questions, and I'm even happier that Fiona is here with any of the technical issues that she can come up and answer some of those as well.
You want to come up, Fiona? Okay, councillors, do you have questions? Councillor Telfer, can I ask, if you don't have a question, kapai. If you do have a question or questions, just try and pull them together when it's your speaking term. If you have real burning questions, I will consider giving more opportunity, but I do want us to also learn how to a meeting operate. I know people are relatively new, but I'm taking all training wheels off. So now I want people to make sure what you want to ask is appropriate. You tell us the paper, the page number, and you ask your question. If you've got more than one kapai, but yes, let's give it a go. Councillor Telfer, you go first.
Yeah, just on that weighting, just discussed around the forestry increase. Can I just have clarification? So we have a weighting on forestry, which is on the land value of their property, which rates are based on. Is that money then allocated back to those specific roads? Because we've got couple of roads, I'll just use it for instance, is the Wharaturu Road and the Waimata Road, which has got a lot of forestry traffic on it. And you look at, I drove up both of them the other day to go have a look, and to be honest, they're shocking and they're dangerous, and there's a lot of complaints coming about potholes and whatnot. So I'm wondering, is that money just going into a general pool for the whole district and tar sealing roads on the flat here, or is it actually being targeted back into those areas? Because they seem to be the worst roads. Understandably, they've got the most heavy traffic on them, but they don't seem to be getting the attention. Look at the amount of the rates.
So just the short answer, it's probably a little bit blunt saying it, but rates is a tax, and how we say we collect what we need to do to fund what we have, we assess it as a whole. And one of the things with the roading rate is to saying, this is the work that we do, this is the program of work that we need to do, this is what we need to collect, and we've assessed it from the forestry sector, what is their part of the damage or the budget that's needed to do on the road per se. When you have a rates as a tax, it doesn't specifically mean that, like yourself, when you pay taxes per se, you wouldn't expect to have a policeman outside your door. It's basically, we need to collect these rates for the whole activity, and this is our program of work. Where the influence comes through is, what is the program of work that you have, and what are we doing? But collecting rates, or what you pay rates for, may not necessarily have a one-to-one relationship to the amount of services that you actually receive. Fees and charges is to have that relationship, but rates are not. So it's a blunt instrument. The only things that you would be doing in those particular areas which we are limited in our ability to do that, which we were, is to have like a roading levy that allows you to collect per se directly from those contributors, and then you could say what we've collected for it would go only on those roads, but we cannot do that. So we have to collect the rates per se from all the sector, and this is the damage associated with it. Ideally, we would like to have had that kind of a mechanism where there's a one-to-one relationship to it, but we can't. It's pretty blunt in terms of it.
Yes, Fincher Swan.
Thank you. Through your worship, the other part that just at a high level in terms of the rates that we collect and apply into the roading, and we'll have to run the numbers again, but we did a review on the distribution of the roading fund. So, and at that time, it would have been 3 years ago, about 60% was coming from the city-based ratepayers, and the majority of the funding was being spent in the rural roading area. So it's treated as a network of investment across, and we don't have enough investment to maintain the whole network, but there are imbalances around how we're applying city road funding to spread it across the rural area in the sense of subsidising and supporting the rural network.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Wharehinga, thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I just want to take us to page 87, point number 30. You spoke about this too in your reply to Councillor Telfer. I also want to ask a question around weighting too. It's the second line, the impact assessment is completed on the whole network. Has that So by that paragraph, are you saying that the impact assessment says that 13.75 weighting will cover the damage from forestry?
So what happens, the review is done by Stantec, like we did with others. They actually say what are the forestry routes that are taken and what are the damage and what are the costs. They go retrospectively, check in the actual costs that was on those roads by that, and they know the amount of volume that is on there. So it is actually historical going backwards, but then we also checked going forward. So we did the first one was 3 years before. We've done another 3 years assessing when we thought we would be needing to collect from that 12.5, and it was basically within 30-40k. And so their assessment is pretty strong with how they assess it. And then you say, what is the forward works program? And then you transpose that to say, what is the sector then, is the forestry sector, as they're using all of the routes, what is their cost and impact on the network? And that's what we say, we need to collect that from the forestry sector, and then that determines the weighting that comes out there. So yes.
So that, just from my understanding, that 13.75 from Stantec also includes the future stuff, or have? Oh, sorry, I'll leave my question there. So,
yes.
So are we confident in that weighting of 13.75% from our own, understanding that Stantec has done this report, from our own regional knowledge, our historical knowledge in regards to damage on forestry road, is our staff comfortable that 13.75 is the right weighting increase? And I'll just preface the question based on the previous discussions that I've had in chambers in regards to the specific weighting and us trying to make sure it's at that right level in order to be able to, I think back on our community out at Ngātapa, and one person started harvesting their trees and it destroyed their entire road. I think about those kinds of things previously from a history of accounts, and I just want to make sure that we are applying the right weighting and some rigor kind of gone into us thinking about this. So that's just to preface my question. Based on our regional knowledge and our historical knowledge, is staff comfortable that this is at 13.75%? Because as a councillor, I think it needs to be higher, but...
Yeah, so that can be under review. They will do it. So every year we will have to review it and say, actually, and test the assumptions that they have. As we've said there, within this, while you might have said it for 3 years, we're saying that every year that needs to be assessed on the forward work programs. So that can come back and to say, okay, and they can review that overall assessment that was done there as well.
So through your worship, the last report I've seen was 2020, which was about a $5.6 million per annum damage on the network, and we're currently contributing about 1.4 million that we were collecting from forestry. So whether or not that 13.5, Pauline, we might be able to get some information about what that contributes to overall in monetary sense.
Sure, and I can give you those kind of things, but so what they've also taken out is the assisted rate that comes through it. So the impact, whereas before was about 2.2, I mean GDC's local share, that we needed to collect from the forestry sector, to gross that up in terms of a 68%, and then they checked, sense checked that, but there are other things to say as actually covering everything and making sure that if there is things that are not there, we need to take into account. So now we're saying that the forestry sector local share is around about 2.8, or just under 3 million associated with it, and Obviously, the gross comes from the Wakate, but we can review it again to just make sure that it is still relevant based on what the volumes that are coming through.
Yeah, good. And just to thank you for the responses this for me and to the CE as well. It's that specific point that the CE brought up that I'm most concerned with is that there's X amount of damage. That 5.6. I couldn't quite remember what those numbers were from the historical, but that 5.6 and then the multiplier only accounting for, say, it sounds like about 2.5. There's still that gap, you know, and so I actually would like to see us have a higher weighting. I think the community would want to see that too, but I do want to see it based on robust thinking, not just arbitrary weighting, but like a robust thinking of this is X damage, Y weighting equals covers the damage across our community.
So I just want to point out that is what this is. The amount, they say the gross amount, what is the damage that it has, what is the local share, and the shortfall, the same from the sector, is around about 2.8 million based on next year's program. The gross amount, I've come back to saying what that damage is, and then that is how that then translates from the sector itself. In order to get that from the whole, we need to charge a 13.75. So it's based on the engineering assessment of that damage, not perhaps a little bit of a different approach, which is in Wairua, and theirs is a punitive assessment that doesn't go from an engineering kind of assessment of the impacts on the roads. Theirs is what is the wider implications that comes from it. So ours is on that basis and has been, but yeah, there is a different approach as well, is how Wairua has completed it.
So one other supplementary. Is there ability in this policy in order to be able to incorporate something additional like that, or like what? Not, and I don't want to use the word punitive, but some kind of measure where you come back and go, actually, the rate that we took, it didn't meet this thing and this the standard of what we'd expect of this road, and to be able to have another conversation with the landowner in regards to that, because that's all we hear from the community is that they just want that road back up where it was, right?
Certainly we can look at it as part of those things coming into it. Where it stands now, we'll be doing on that other basis, but we would need to have form what is it, and what is the policy that you would want to take, and we'd have to have a little bit more information rather than, and how do we come up with that. But Dora, did you want to say something? Oh, sorry. Yeah. So basically we'll come back with more details with regards to what would that look like.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
We need to consult specifically on that as well.
Councillors,
thank you very much, Ms.
This comment is more for the new councillors, because the more seasoned councillors, I was going to say older, but I thought more seasoned. Remember 2 or 3 years ago when Councillor Worsnott wrote that detailed remit that I took to local government New Zealand, and it was supported by all council, and it has been taken forward by local government New Zealand, where forestry needs a rating overhaul. Because Fiona, is it true as soon as you plant, the value goes down if there are trees, which mean you have this property, but as soon as you plant it, the value goes down, which means we get less money for that. And so what we have asked of the government is to do a total overhaul to reflect what is not only experienced in our region, but also nationwide. So that work is still being carried on. And then I do want to comment about us having a scientific, fact-based approach, because Councillor Wharehinga, you would recall that the Wairua Council have been tied up in legislation, in court cases for the last while. I think they won in the end, but it was a very stressful process where they were also supported by local government New Zealand. But I do applaud our approach. We have facts and weightings that we can defend and that are realistic. But overall, there is more damage than money we get for that damage. We shouldn't lose sight of the fact that there is still a shortfall there. If we look at our network and the damage to the network, there is not enough money being collected to fix that. Any other questions in regards to this paper? Councillor Pahuruhuriwai, thank you.
Thank you, Bishop. Thank you, ladies, for the report. Page 86, paragraph 35. Oh, where am I? It talks about payment rates and unused separately rateable parks. So what is unused? I think we had this discussion when we discussed Māori land around what was an unused portion of land. What does unused mean? Does that mean, I think we had the discussion then about 25 beehives as opposed to 26 beehives, or 2 horses instead of 15 horses. Is there a definition of what unused means?
Yes, on page 165, there's 2 parts of definitions. There's the definitions as a whole, but there's the definitions that we had further clarification with regards to the remissions on Maori freehold land. And on that it says, halfway down, it says a rating unit is unused. And it's got 1, 2, 3 conditions associated with it. It's not using any part of it. The entire rent's similar to manor to reserve or conservation, leased by any other person, residential accommodation, used by an activity, commercial or agricultural. Did we further clarify with regards to, there was that discussion that says, okay, so 2 or 3 horses, is there this or that with regards to those?
I'm fairly sure the decision was that it really was becoming irrelevant whether it was 2 horses or 1 horse or whatever, but where it was, say, 10 horses, then it was obviously being a more commercial grazing type of thing. With the beehives, the conclusion, I think, was in line with what the Beekeepers Association have on their website about when it becomes a commercial activity. It is very difficult to manage the beehive situation though, because bees don't stay in one place, and often the beehives get moved around themselves, and with rating, everything depends on what it is at the 1st of July. So if the beehive's not there, which is likely because it's winter, then yeah.
Supplementary to that then is, I guess, so in regards to small blocks where they might have, I don't know, 60 sheep, a few head of cattle, it's not commercial, it's really just to feed the family and to cover rates. It's not, but so it's the same thing, I guess, like beehives is in terms of what constitutes a use or a commercial use of where there's profit coming off that land. Because in a lot of cases, I suppose there won't be many that are in that situation.
If there was 60 cattle being grazed on the block, then it would be considered as being used.
So again, it's good to have like a number, I suppose, so that whānau know that if they're under that number, then they're actually not commercial, they're just feeding.
Yeah, it's covered under the clause that Pauline was talking about under C, used for any activity, whether commercial or agricultural, other than for personal visits to the land. Or the collection of kai.
Which meat is kai, but also, thank you for that. The page 97, it refers to paying for the services they receive. Sorry, just get back to that one. That, and again, I'm just thinking about up close where often the complaints that we get is what do we get for our rates, and the services that they receive, such as we pay for the library, we pay for quite a bit for parks and parks and things. We've not that many parks up the coast. And so again, in terms of what do we pay, each generation should pay for the services they receive, is there equity in there?
So these are the principles associated with it, and probably when it comes, you assess each activity. What do you consider as a public good, or those? So you consider all of them in aspects, and also I referred to before the sections of the acts when you do what are the needs analysis associated with it. The first step it says, I don't know whether it's under there, most appropriate undertaken. It's actually on page 96. So in 96, it says the two parts of the section. It says section 101(3)A, and it says, okay, on that activity, consider all there is either basically the benefits that the people won't be receiving it, what are the ones that are contributing to the cost, which we've done roading, we've done impact of those that impact the roads, so therefore we set it on those. So all of those are taken into consideration when you set it, and then you say, well, how do you apply it as another part of it? Is it applied to only a specified area, or actually is it actually across the whole of the district associated with it? And by and large, the reticulated services within the city are charged to those that are receiving that service. But there is a general public good for some of the reserves that we charge everybody. And then there are other elements that you would consider, so for argument's sake, the transfer stations, which are in the rural areas. The city is significantly subsidising them to do that, and so while there's pros and cons. And that's the same thing as what Nadine had said also with regards to the roading network. 80% of the cost is in the rural area, but over nearly 60% of the city people are paying for it. So each part of that is considered when you're actually determining how that portion is spread.
And also I want to add something which I don't think the new council have seen. You know, we've got different zones, like 1A, what is it called, Fiona? Not zones.
Differential rating areas?
Yes, our differential rating areas. So if you are in an outlier right up north, you might have only a 20% weighting to the library charge. You will not be paying 100% like someone living in the city. So there is accommodation for services which are mostly for people who are close by to it and are probably going to use it more, and they will pay, say, 100% of that weighting for the museum or the library or the pool, whereas you move out into different zones, there's a lesser weighting to acknowledge that you might use the pool once a month, or you contribute to the greater good, but you do not carry the same weighting on your rates contribution as someone who lives in the city. So that's something I'm not sure if we're going to go down into that detail, but there are definite accommodations for those different areas where people live in regards to services that are more tuned to the city.
Thank you, Worship. I think that would be a really useful piece of information alongside this.
Yes.
So that our rural people understand what that zoning means, and because that's really helpful information that most people don't.
That might be good just to,
A lot of that technical detail is covered in the funding impact statement, and it does include maps of those zones, which are referred to as the inner and outer zone. So the inner zone is DRA 1, 1A and 2, which is roughly the city, the perimeter around the city and the Poverty Bay Flats. It was first brought up as being anything that was an approximately half hour's drive of the city. They were more likely to use some services more, and that is where that differentiation first came in.
What we can do, I think you have a kind of the workshops of how it works, what it comes through as a precursor to some of the work where if there are things that we do need to change. I would suggest that will be from the 2025, from the 1st of July. As we move through, that would come through, and having a little bit more workshops, maybe in the finance, as to what this is, what are we up to, as details around the different things.
Because there's a real misunderstanding often when I visit people in the rural areas. Someone would say, but I don't even have my rubbish removed. And I want to say, but I don't. I want to say, yeah, but you're not charged for it. So it is, there is not a clear understanding of, people think if I pay my rates, and there might be, say, a 10% rubbish collection fee. That is the part that everyone pays for something, that the rubbish is collected in the city or in the rural area, but they are not charged the rate that someone would pay in the city to have their rubbish and recycling picked up. So maybe a little deep dive just to get everyone on the same page, also to field questions from the public more equipped.
I'd rather just see a map that says this is zone 1.
There it is. There it is. There.
Yeah, cool. That can go out with this document when we're consulting or engaging community.
Right.
That would be really helpful.
Councillor Ria, thank you.
Sorry, to add on the back of what Councillor Huriwa was saying, that possible languaging too, because when you say this is what you're charged because you receive this, when I receive something, it comes to me or I get it in my hands. So I have heard comments out in the community, but I don't receive that. But the difference is that the service is still available to you. So in the languaging of services you receive or that are available to you, just makes it really clear and distinct that you may not receive it and you may not be using it, but actually it is open to you to access and to utilise.
Good wording. Okay, last question, Councillor Gregory. Well then put your hand up. Councillor Gregory, and then we'll wrap up with Councillor Alder.
Just want to thank you to ask about the weighting. It must be a difficult thing to decide what weighting goes where, and in which case is it targeted and in which case is it not. And I'm digging myself out of culverts and drains and up into rivers, which attending these symposiums and these research conferences that have been on in Gisborne this last couple of weeks, clearly river work is the root of our problems, and and I look at the Waipu and they pay, so much of it comes out of general rates and then the targeted side of it, whereas how do you decide that if the Waipu was sorted out and the Waimata and all our rivers, the problems would be eased for everybody, and maybe that we need to relook at that targeting at some point, because I think our rivers should be king. Thanks.
So you're suggesting that we spread it over
Yes,
the whole
a bigger
community,
region,
see that
because
portion.
The benefit for everyone is huge in the long run, because we've seen what happens when we don't invest in our rivers.
Just to add with that, that can be the review, because it was highly targeted, the rivers and then drainage within those particular areas. What we have done and said within this is double what the provision that we actually had before, and we said everybody pays. With the UAGC, why we go through and find out where is the best to have that maintenance, what's going to be the protection of residential houses for the priorities, what can we do and what does that mean? So at the moment, that part is exactly what you said is a charge for everybody, the second part of it. And the review of that, encompassing that whole sort of things, can be completed as the revenue and financing check and balance with some of these.
Councillor Alder.
Thank you. I actually have quite a few questions, but I'll flip through them quick. I know it is a draft and for consultation, so it's not going to be locked solid. First question is around item 23, page 86, and it's discussing maintenance and preemptive work to protect bridges, etc. and how forestry and the pastoral sector will be tasked with that, or target rated for that. My question is that just pastoral, and are there going to be horticultural properties in that as well? And sorry, I should have declared an interest. I have a pastoral-horticultural property in a zone. Getting back to the subject, horticultural properties rated as well, and when the talk of preemptive work and maintenance, do the stakeholders, ratepayers, have any say in how that maintenance and preemptive work is going to pan out?
So, first question, it's only pastoral farms, but if it's a high species associated with the property, so if it's deemed pastoral, it would be charged that. Second part of it, as part of the consultation, we will be having that kind of issue. This is what we have with regards to our rivers and land drains. This is how we've got. We're suggesting that we are going to do more, but we also need to know where is it going to best a review of how is it going to work in the future as well. And one of the second questions, the options, do you want us to do more? The priorities, obviously, those programs and things will come through when it's also assessing where is it, what do we assess with it, but the question will be consulted out to the community, do you want to pay more?
Because there's farmers out there feeling they need to be consulted on issues. Page 87, the forestry sector weighting, what is the Wairau rate? What is Wairau charging them?
It's when they brought their policy in, we looked at a property that was very similar in value to one of ours, and theirs was double. So I think it was about a $10 million property I looked at, and the rates here for the forestry were like 95,000, and in Wairau they were like 180,000.
Well, they've done the legwork. Why don't we follow on? My next question or comment really is in around that report. I found it really hard to read, and again, when you've got headings that are only on page 1, even if they're just abbreviated.
That's formatting that needs to come through. I
So
do
little
apologise.
time to read these documents. Anything will help us is good. Page 117. Who creates the need? Some services are provided if the actions or inactions of individuals create the problem. Does this also apply to council? If through its inactivity or actions affecting a rated sector, requiring that sector to be subjected to a catch-up or extra rates, should council take this into account? I'll just follow that up with, we all make mistakes, and so does council. Do we make our mistakes and make adjustments accordingly?
I think that's...
Well, I can tell you, I have admitted several mistakes on behalf of councillors or staff or people that don't feel listened to or they don't feel that they've received what they paid for. So absolutely, I eat humble pie quite often. But it is sometimes because of behaviours of councillors, sometimes behaviour of others, sometimes services received, people don't feel it's up to scratch, so often that happens.
And within fixing something. Next question, again, a bit about graphs, and that's page 119, where we're showing what the suggested rating level is. In this case, it's 100% fees are going to be charged directly. It'd be nice to see another column with where our existing level is, just so we can see where the goalposts are being moved.
So there's two things. This is the policy that sets it at a high level. This is the bands that you actually have. Where you see the details is what Fiona gave a little bit of the allude to that, is in the funding impacts. That goes right into it. You adopt it each year at your annual plan, or you'll do this for the 3 years, and that will give you the specific details associated where it is what's occurring. Mostly within, this is a band, so it allows you to have flexibility.
And it's a high-level policy, it's not
Yeah.
detailed as such.
So it's around 80% that the building consents is fees and charges, and we check that. Are they achieving it in terms of when you're sitting there? Obviously, it's
Next one is on land drainage, page 124. And this is such an important area for the flats farmers. And farmers are taking drainage into their own hands, and I know they are starting to clear council drains. This drainage issue needs to be addressed quickly, and it's a job that if it was done efficiently, I believe farmers would happily pay whatever the cost was. So the farmers have no control over how and when a job like this is done. I think we, as farmers, need to have more say, and we'll happily pay the bill if we know we're going to get the problem solved. But there are trees dying out there. Page 26, what's the difference between non-subsidised local roads, sorry, page 126, non-subsidised roads versus subsidised roads?
Put simply, it's money that we don't get from Wakatai to do a thing, to do the work that we need to do. So if it's something within the town that has some elements associated with curb signs that doesn't fit in with under the Wakatai subsidised program, it's called non-subsidised.
We pay 100%.
It used to be footpaths as well, but they've now brought it up to a limit for footpaths as being under the subsidised, but there are elements that they, over and above that, would have to go into the non-subsidised.
Sorry, I didn't hear your answer, Pauline. The very first sentence you said is the definition of what was a non-subsidised road.
It's just subsidised is what we get that Wakatai will contribute to us, which is ours is currently at 66%.
Sorry, the non-subsidised roads you said.
You don't get any money.
But you gave an example of a road in town, but I didn't hear the key word.
It's not the road. It would be elements that doesn't actually fit to the road. So if there is the paving on some of the things that's above a certain level in the towns, that's not eligible.
Oh, right.
Components that are still classified as roading, but it is not as such and gets zero waka putahi contributions, 100% paid by council.
So it's not, in fact, the road, it's the damage to the road that is subsidised or unsubsidised.
No, it's the classification of the work that you actually do. The bulk of the work is actually roads, but there are some elements that we may add to that wouldn't be classified as coming under theirs. And mostly, as I say, pavements or anything that we do, enhancements or footpaths around that would not be classified as subsidised.
Getting close to the end, page 133, and we're talking soil conservation and soil conservation ministries. To me, there's a real blur between rivers and soil conservation, and who is going to foot the bill for what. And so is river maintenance stopping erosion and therefore soil conservation?
Three different elements. This is protection and conservation on a wider areas, whereas the river maintenance is under the rivers and land drainage, so they complete the channels and things are different. This is preserving at a higher level across all the kind of the activities. They may go beyond and work with farms and individuals about what they can do in their particular area and farm management. So no, they're two separate areas of activities.
Right. So Debbie had it right that it is going to be a joint thing on, and that's me, thank you.
Well, it's coffee time, people. Do I have a mover for this paper? Councillor Robinson, seconded by Councillor Foster. All in favour? Contrary carried. Councillors, thank you for your well thought out questions and analysis of the papers. Thank you, staff, for your responses. Let's have a coffee. So, councillors, we are on page 170. So we're going to talk about, these are standard reports we get at. So what we're going to do is move through this. We will be moving into public excluded after that. And we will probably be out of here around 12:31ish. So just a rough indication for those of you that travel or do stuff. So page 170, thank you. This is our normal, that PwC also assists Pauline to keep us online. I see there was just one counterparty credit risk, but that was addressed. So Pauline, I'll open it up for you and then any questions from council.
So as I mentioned before, when we were identifying the umbrella policies, which is the liability policies, this is underneath that, but there's some more technical terms, which is the Treasury policy, which says the details around what are the corridors, when you're actually within these kind of maps. So this, if you like, is the report on where we are with our external debt and what's occurring. At this particular point in time, we have just under 148 million of what we expected to be for 148 million in our annual plan. What was after, there may be a little bit, we were forecasting if we need to draw down long-term debt before the 30th of June, which may go above that, or alternatively is there short-term debt. To just explain, when we set the annual plan, the category 3 buyouts and our 50% share wasn't in those original estimates, but when we reforecast it, when we were going out to consult, we said we might be a little bit over that 148 million, depending on when the sales and purchases come through. So effectively where we are, where we expect to be, but there may be some more debt that would bring down for those particular, our share of the rest of the funds that we need to do. But they're the main things. The actual, little bit out of policy is just as it's said before, our policy did not take into account that we had money on hand. And so therefore the deposits that we received that hasn't quite been spent for in advance of the woody debris puts it a little bit out of policy at the current point. It's a timing issue, it's not any significant issues, but we will also be updating a Treasury policy to take into those circumstances that if we do get deposits, it takes into the overall policy changes. But it's no significant issue with regards to that. Happy to take any questions.
Councillor Robinson, thank you.
Page 173, paragraph 8, bottom of the page, talks about us extending Westpac's temporary facility by 10 million. This is to cover short-term cash deficits, mostly arising from timing discrepancies from external funding. Can you tell us what the actual real cost to council is of those timing deficiencies? If we've extended our overdraft by 10 million to cover the cost of timing money in, can we sheep those extra costs home to the provider, or can we at least strongly advise them this is the actual cost to you guys holding the funds and wherever you're holding it before you give it to us?
Most cases, you're quite right. We'd like to get the money up front before we have to do it, or alternatively, if we're paying our creditors, we want to have it at the same time as we're getting the money in. It not necessarily occurs. One of the things that we are working through is the roading, making sure that the work that we're doing on the networkers would match the time that we get the revenue that is needed from them to confirm the different things. That's a little bit out of order. we are trying to make sure that they become in kilter, but the real risk is if we don't do some of that work, you have other greater risk or safety onto the network. So in most cases, we try to say, I want money in, money out, but in some cases it doesn't always occur. And unfortunately, in those particular cases, we foot the bill for the interest that we may be incurring while we're holding those funds.
And the actual cost of that interest?
At the moment, we're in the black, meaning because we've got the woody debris money up front, and that last year we had about an extra 1 million of interest with all of the things in and out. We would be starting to, we're still in okay, but as we go through and spending all of those things and then incurring the other costs, they will start to mount up. So can't quantify it as such, but the net difference is we're okay in terms of we've got more money from other funds that we received in advance from those that we haven't received the money from, but it's mindful of managing that very, very closely.
Okay, thank you for the explanation. Then why have we extended our overdraft by $10 million? And the rationale is to cover the cost of those deficits. You just said we can't quantify them, but we've gone into the bank and justified.
It's prudent. You have to have money. It's just if you
Must have some indication, must have some idea of how much this is additional cost to us by not having money in before we put money out.
No, it's only if you draw it. So this is a facility to have available.
I understand that part. Yeah.
So we won't incur anything unless we actually draw it down. It's just like saying your credit card, I want to extend it instead of $10,000 and $25 because I might, the way that it comes in and out, it actually allows us to do business as fast as we can. And this is all that is being prudent to make sure that we've got those facilities in there before we actually take on long-term debt. And it's only a temporary measure. It's just saying we need to have, if there's an in and out difference over 1 or 2 months, then we'll extend that to allow us to do that business. But as yet, it's only a facility to allow us to do the business as we have it occur. Any other questions in regards to this? I'm happy to move this. Any other questions or queries? Seconded by Councillor Ria. Councillor Alder, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. I have a few questions. Sorry for that. Start with the difficult one. Page 183, employee benefit expenses.
Next paper.
Next paper.
Next paper.
Next paper.
Yeah. All in favour? 1-3 carried. Okay, we'll open the next paper, Councillor Alder, and you will be first in line with your questions. Okay, financial report, page 179. Thank you, councillors. It's basically, as you say, it's the 6 months. Where were we at, and what we actually reported is what is the kind of the variance we expected to be at this particular point, and what are the main things that are likely to be or indicating that they could be realised by year end. And so we're indicating at this stage that we expected to have just under 4 million as a net surplus. So, and my apologies, I'm jumping two things. If you were trying to read it, on page 183, and you're looking at that table, revenue and expenses, and you're looking at the December actuals, down midway near to the end, it says net surplus deficit, it says 2 million, and alongside that, it says just 4 million where we expect it to be as that timing, and the difference you can see is just under 2 million. So where we explain in the summary page, what is it and why is it lower and what are the main changes, and we said, well, the first part of that is the dividends, which we expected to have been received, and the other part is how we are accounting recognition, which is the movements and swaps, which may or may not realise in the future. So that's the main underlying changes where we expect it to be from the full year's report. But happy to take any questions.
Councillor Alder, you are first cab of the rank.
Thank you. So just noting that on page 183, employee expenses, last year our actual employee expenses were 30.6 million, and this year's coming budget is a 9.15% increase. Over the last 3 years, we've actually had a 42% increase, and I realise there was a catch-up as part of that. As governors, do we get any input into this?
So when you had the draft, that was when we did that in January. And I believe in that particular question, and it was a good question, to say what's changed, why are there different things, and also at the annual report, what would change from where we had previously. Effectively, you're not comparing apples with apples. What we've got significant parts of the employees that are doing increased levels of service, so the recovery office, then there's also with anything that we need to do for additional things. So there's significant levels in terms of the overall deliverables in the capital programs. So when you just say that's a significant increase, there's two different things. As I mentioned before, that the actual increase for existing would only be by the rate of inflation. Anything else that is over and above that relates to, for us delivering those services, or alternatively, the other major things that have occurred where we had the discussion with increased resources for our monitoring and the capital programs, which is in regards to recovery.
Next question, same page, depreciation of $14 million. What portion of that depreciation could be attributable to our roading system?
Portion. I know that end of the year, it is the total year. It would probably be, it's majority. Let's put it that way. It's majority. I think it's about 20 million. The full years is 30 million and 20 million. But bear in mind, we don't raise our rates to cover all of the cost of our depreciation. We have to recognise all of the cost for depreciation, but we don't raise rates for that. We only raise rates for our local share of that portion. So if it is 20 million, we only raise rates for about 9 million of it. So there's a difference in that.
So, and as mentioned, it's not a cash thing, so it's not something we bring out and actually spend on.
No, you do that in your levels of service. You actually say in your roads and what's the program that it is. This is just a recognition of what's the wear and tear on those assets within your set of accounts.
If I could jump to 188, roading, and the renewals to date equate to 65% of the budget. So at the end of December, we have spent 65% of the budgeted amount on renewal roading. Why are we supposedly under pressure to stop spending on roading when we are only 65% through, and it makes sense to target to try and be 80 to 90 to 100% through by May, whether it's we can't do any more roading?
I'll probably defer, but I'll just say one of the things that we've got in here is probably when they're scheduled with the renewal program. That usually is always done in the second or third quarter with regards to this the renewals basis, what's it's doing there. So it says 70% that is included within that overall program. You've also got the maintenance program, but I will defer if Tim can give actual details with the program itself.
So on the, excuse me, on the roading renewals program, we're actually ahead of our budgeted schedule. We're at 70% on the renewals for BAU renewals. And we did that with that element of budget to take advantage of the good weather. So that will be reeled back in the later part of the financial year for our BAU works. So we meet budget on those works. That's different to the recovery and emergency work.
Thank you. That's enough.
Thanks. While we're on that page, Mr. Barry, a question that I raised with you yesterday, which I thought would be good to understand. If you take a look at that community lifelines and some of the spending which goes till the end of December, so that's our half-year spending, are already sitting at 111, like Land Rivers 208. So some of those budgets have already been doubly spent. And I was interested to know, where did you get the money from, or are those allocations that we received extra money from the government in order to do that work?
Thank you, Your Worship. The question you asked relates to work undertaken which will be recovered through mostly Crown funding. So that's the case with roading, which is reads at 111%. That's made up, so 28 odd million's made up with provincial growth fund elements and other projects which are 100% funded by recovery, emergency works. So the difference essentially in the roading elements is Crown funding. The difference in the water supply are insurance related. So the pipeline from Sang Dam is with NEMA in process, but in this it's reported as actual spend, which it is, but it's coming back. Wastewater is also tracking over by 108%. That's related to emergency works with items like TOMOs that were undertaken at the time, and it's just a process of getting that back. We're actually behind spend if you were to look at this on stormwater. We're expecting the later part of the financial year to track up on that particular item, just related to our procurement processes. And Land Rivers and Coastal, that's recorded as 200 or something % above, but that's all Crown funded, so it's Crown Infrastructure Partners. So the differences in those percentages are is related to how we're presenting those.
Just a supplementary question about that. Have we received some of that money, or is it money that we claw back afterwards, or is it a combination of both?
Combination of both.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Okay, Councillor Thompson.
Just a quick question. 183 is probably already answered with Councillor Robinson before. Interest received quite a significant number, just over 1.5 mil. I can see that's with money sitting in the bank we haven't used. Is that correct?
And that's from sitting in the money that we received from other funds, so that's right. So some of the, if you look down below, the financing cost is over, but we've also got some of the, and so some of that's offsetting one another, yes.
Councillor Robinson, thank you.
Why would we not pay down some of our overdraft facility rather than put it as a TD and get interest? Because your overdraft facility is always going to be at a higher rate, isn't it? Or can we make more money by putting it on TD than we're paying?
No, we have to ring fence the funds in those particular things. We couldn't use the woody debris. It would not be prudent to actually funds that we'd use for the woody debris that it was using for a short period. We have to ring fence those funds for that particular purposes rather than offloading some of our other debt expenses. But in normal situations, if it was, we would probably think about that, deferring before we have to draw down. But in this case, we have to ring fence it.
Do you have a supplementary question?
So that's pretty much a bonus 1.5 mil we weren't expecting. So where do you sort of allocate that? Because it's money
It just falls to the bottom line with other costs, because we'll have other costs. So for argument's sake, the high cost of when we don't receive the money in a time for the funds, it's a cost to us. So really they're kind of offsetting one another, really, yeah.
Okay, any last questions of clarification? Thank you. These are our standard reports we receive at every reporting cycle. If not, moved by Councillor Wharehinga, seconded by Councillor Pahuruhuruai. All in favour, contrary, carried. I move that we move into public excluded, seconded by Councillor Wharehinga. All in favour, contrary, carried.